Kirill didn't come to Ronka's graduation. He worked a lot, and lately he hadn't been with his family even on weekends. At the same time, Ronka hoped so much that his father would see him receive his kindergarten diploma. He dreamed that after the official part, he and his parents would go karting, and in the evening they would all go to the movies together, but Kirill didn't keep his promise. Roma had to make up a whole legend why only his mom was with him at the party. Other boys came with their fathers, and Ronka was ashamed that he was inferior. He remembered how he had been teased for not having a daddy, and his childhood worries and resentments awoke in him again. Svetlana realized that Kirill behaved ugly and decided to talk to him, but he reacted surprisingly dryly to her claims. "Come on, what nonsense. It's not even graduation. It's just the end of kindergarten. And anyway, stop nagging me. See, I'm tired," he said, and Svetlana had to back off. She promised her son that they all go to the movies together another time. Roma again believed, but the next time did not happen. Before Ronka's birthday, Kirill told Svetlana that she and her son needed to pack up and move out. "I found someone else. Young, beautiful, the one who will give me a child of her own." "But you didn't want children," Sveta flared up. "Then I didn't, now I do. It's none of your business." Svetlana did not understand what was wrong with her. She could still give birth, but when they met, Kirill had a condition. "We're not planning children yet. Roma is still small. He needs a lot of attention. I was jealous when my younger brother was born, so Roma will thank me later." Sveta shrugged her shoulders. She didn't mind giving birth, but she was afraid of being alone again, and it would be too hard for her to carry 2 children. Sveta had no helpers. Ronkin's father appeared in her life for a short time. Their affair ended, and they broke up. When she found out she was pregnant, it was too late to terminate. Sveta plucked up the courage and called him, but the phone was picked up by his wife. Then Sveta decided not to ruin the family and bore the burden of a single mother. Her mother was building her personal life on the other side of the globe. She considered herself young, and she was not at all to Sveta, and certainly not to her grandson. She sold the apartment, left her daughter to her fate, and went abroad. She promised that she would buy her an apartment when she got settled, but it didn't happen. At first, Sveta lived in a hostel for students of a pedagogical school and then had to rent. She managed to find an old, almost emergency apartment on the first floor, which she could afford. The landlady was accommodating and took a very modest payment, realizing that the apartment needed repairs. Sveta dreamed that soon everything would get better and she would be able to move in. Occasionally on holidays, her mother sent her money and tutoring brought income. Svetlana had enough to live on, but with the appearance of her son, it became very difficult. Moving was out of the question. Fortunately, Roma was a calm child and Sveta was able to conduct additional classes even with a baby. And then he went to kindergarten and she went out full-time. And again, she thought about the fact that it was necessary to change the conditions of life. So when Svetlana met Kirill, a young, wealthy man who settled in the neighborhood, she realized that it was fate. He helped her with household chores several times. Something was constantly breaking down in the rented apartment, and in return, Svetlana fed him delicious pies and borscht. Then he began to come to dinner more often, and after a month of relationship proposed to her to move in together. Svetlana was over the moon. She and Roma moved in with Kirill. Sveta had a husband, albeit unofficial, and Ronka finally had a daddy. He bragged to his friends, proudly walked hand in hand with Kirill, and called him daddy. Some of Ronka's friends came up with the idea that Kirill was his real father, who had realized his mistake and returned to the family. Roma believed this explanation, and Svetlana didn't change his mind. Kirill did not care, but after a few years, he found himself a new woman and thought about his children. Sveta, in his opinion, was no longer suitable for the role of mother, and her extra Ronka only annoyed his strange attachment. "Move out," said Kirill, "but we cannot so quickly, and what are we going to live on?" Try to get through to him, Sveta. "This is not my problem," Spend as you want. On alimony does not count. Be thankful I haven't charged you rent in all these years. What are you talking about? We shared a household. One more word, and I'll put you out the door as it is, threatened Kirill and made it clear that the conversation is over. Sveta was afraid for her son. She did not want to spoil Ronka's holiday with a scandal. Please, let's pretend that everything is fine for Ronka's sake. At least tomorrow, she begged. I will not pretend that all is well. I don't have to love your son. But so be it. I'll let you stay here for 2 more days, but then go wherever you want. Svetlana cried all night, and the next day, when Kirill went to work, she inflated balloons for her son, but still could not bake his favorite cake. Everything fell out of her hands. She did not know what to think and how to act. She was saved by the fact that her son's friends came. Some boys occupied the child with games, and he did not pay attention to her mood. But Nina Glebovna, Kirill's mother, who came to visit, noticed Sveta's crying eyes. What happened? Did someone die? She asked. No, everything is normal. Svetlana waved away. She was not on close terms with Nina Glebovna. It seemed to her that it was her mother who had turned Kirill against their official marriage. Nina Glebovna did not want a woman with a trailer for her son, as she had said repeatedly. Of course, behind the eyes, but Svetlana was very unpleasant. And yet, Nina Glebovna did not refuse to help with Roma, the disco with him, and then changed her attitude and accepted, forgetting about what she said at first. Sveta, let's be honest. I need to know what's going on with you. Nina Glebovna came over and put her hand on her shoulder. I know that you are angry with me, but believe me, I have long considered you my daughter-in-law. And I can't understand why Kirill is still dragging his feet about getting married. He's getting married. You cannot worry. Sveta abruptly turned around and looked her in the eyes. And when is the wedding? He didn't say. I don't know. What's that? Like this, he's getting married, but not to me. Ronka and I are strangers to him. Nina Glebovna opened her eyes and almost dropped the towel. Over time, she realized that Sveta was a good wife and mother. Clean, economical, and most importantly, loving. Though not immediately, she realized that Kirill was in good hands, and it was a pity to lose such a daughter-in-law. I'll talk to him. Don't. It won't change anything. What about Ronka? I don't know. It will be a serious blow to him, Sveta cried. Don't grieve. We'll think of something. Nina Glebovna tried to comfort Svetlana, but she only sobbed harder. Nina Glebovna kept her word, but Kirill did not listen to his mother's arguments. He was angry with Sveta, thought that she had complained to his mother, and without choosing phrases, said that he would no longer tolerate her in his house, the opportunists. Roma began to cry and ask him not to leave him, but he did not care about the feelings of the child. Kirill said everything he thought and told the boy that he was not his son at all. Sveta wanted to shield the child from new pain, but it was too late. Roma could not understand why his father decided to abandon him again and blamed himself for everything. Nina Glebovna barely managed to persuade Ronka to go with her to give mom and dad a chance to talk. But instead of talking, Sveta began to pack her things. She realized that there would be no second chance. Not knowing where to go, she called the landlady of the previous apartment and said that she and her son were returning. It turned out that the apartment had been renovated and the terms of the lease had changed. Svetlana realized that she would not be able to pay so much, and she finally lost her temper. But help came from where no one expected it. How did you find me? What are you doing here? Svetlana asked the unexpected guest. She was flooded with memories of the past. I came to see my mother. But how did you end up here? Asked the man. He recognized her, even though it had been years since their last meeting. I live here. Svetlana took a step back, not understanding anything. Nina Glebovna didn't say she had another son. Yes? Didn't you call me this afternoon? You? Yes, but your name is Nikolay. Nikolay is me. That's my real name. I lied to you then, I'm sorry, he said quietly and entered the apartment. I'm surprised too, but it's not the time to rake up the past. We'll talk later. Okay, where is the mother? Svetlana silently escorted Nina Glebovna's son and her old lover into the room. In her head did not fit what had happened. She thought that such things do not happen in life, but it turned out that she was wrong. Nicholas was left alone with his mother. Svetlana went to Ronka. He was very tired from worrying about his grandmother, so he slept quietly but did not smile in his sleep. The boy was serious beyond his years and very much like his father, who ironically was at that moment behind the wall. Svetlana didn't know if she should have told him that Roma was his son. She didn't know what would happen next at all. She was afraid and bitter to lose Nina Glebovna, but she couldn't help her. That's it, Mom, she's gone. She heard a voice and noticed a male silhouette sliding down the wall. Nikolay sat down on the floor and covered his face with his hands. At that moment, any conversation was out of the question. All thoughts were about Nina Glebovna. This night became a turning point, difficult for everyone. Only Kirill slept peacefully, not knowing that his mother no longer held anything on this earth. She received forgiveness from her youngest son and quietly left. Nina Glebovna never learned that Ronka, her grandson, but for her he was already the most beloved and close. Nikolay forgave his mother and asked for her forgiveness himself, promising to take care of Svetlana and Ronka. He couldn't even imagine that Ronka was his son, but only until morning came and the boy came out of the bedroom. Crying, sleepy, but too much like Kolenka as a child. Nikolay was struck by how sincerely Roma experienced the loss of his beloved grandmother, but he was even more struck by the similarity between them. He recognized himself in the boy, and he had many questions for Seda. But it was impossible to talk about the important things. It was necessary to organize a farewell to Nina Glebovna, to settle matters with the apartment, and to put Kirill in his place. Nikolay's brother as if off the chain, having learned that Svetlana, instead of freeing the apartment, is engaged in the funeral. And the appearance of his younger brother was not part of Kirill's plans at all. They almost fought, and if it were not for a perky neighbor who managed to pacify the brothers, their quarrel would have turned into a brawl. "For your mother's sake, have a conscience," she said. 40 days have not yet passed, and already share what does not belong to you. Well, I'm not for myself, but for my son," Nikolay burst out. "You have no children. I know everything. And you haven't lived with your wife for a long time, so you're not entitled to anything. But as my older brother, I'm entitled. I have a son. And my mother wanted to sign the apartment over to him." "What kind of son is that? You and Mom are both crazy," Kirill snarled. The neighbor was surprised and looked questioningly at Seda. "It's true," Svetlana said quietly. "Roma is Nikolay's son, and Nina Glebovna is his grandmother. It's hard to believe, but it's true." Kirill laughed, but no one else was laughing but him. "Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant?" Nikolay asked. "And why didn't you tell me you were married? You also introduced yourself with a different name." "Yeah, I don't know. Probably because I didn't see her as my wife anymore. We divorced a month after we met. I was a fool. I married young, against my mother's wishes. Then I got divorced, but I couldn't admit to myself that I'd only loved one woman my whole life. I was ashamed to admit my mistakes and weaknesses. It was easier to live in a perpetual search and blame others for your troubles. Mother, brothers, neighbors, girls, anyone. Only when you lose loved ones can you realize how much time has been lost, that life is passing, and you have gained nothing but regret. But unlike others, I'm still lucky. I still have the opportunity to make a difference. After all, now I found out that I have a son, Ronka, and that my favorite woman was there all this time, but my pride and resentment blinded my eyes. If I had found out earlier, everything could have been completely different. You've got it, brother." Kirill clapped his hands together. A speech worthy of a theater stage. "I don't care what you think, Kirill. Svetlana, I'm sorry. I want you to know that in any case, I will take care of you and Ronka. It was Mother's last will, and it's my will too. You can continue the concert without me." "I'll meet you in court, lovebirds," Kirill said and slammed the door. Svetlana did not immediately let Nikolai back into her heart. She allowed him to meet with his son, take part in his upbringing, and accept financial assistance. Nicholas gave them his apartment, and he temporarily lived in his mother's apartment, while the proceedings with his brother lasted. According to the court decision, the apartment had to be divided by shares. Even though Nina Glebovna wanted to attribute everything to her grandson, she did not have time to make a will, and Kirill still got a part of her property. The brothers divided the money by selling the apartment. But Cyril, this money did not bring happiness. He gave everything to his wife, who twisted it as she wanted. Kirill did not understand it. His mind was stupefied. He wanted children, but nothing worked, and in the end, his wife left a younger and promising man, leaving Kirill alone and suing him for property. Nikolai put all the money into his son's account. Having sold the apartment, he returned to his home. Svetlana was not against it because she lived on his territory, and she also realized that Roma needs a father. And she more and more often wanted to spend time with Nikolai. After a while, she forgave him and gave him a second chance. Fate finally put everything in its place. They became happy even after so many lost years.